Ursa Lord High Artificer is a new spoiler from Modern Horizon, and if you don't know the lore about Ursa, he's something of a demi-god. And this is a character that we have been asking Wizard to make a card of for a very long time. And the big problem is that this character is a demi-god. He is actually that super powerful. He's supposed to be more powerful than the currently Nicobola's Planeswalker cards we have. So he should cost something about 17 mana and have maybe 10 different abilities. But I truly believe that they actually made it something of a demi-god card out of this one, because this card is actually extremely good. A mono blue legendary creature, a great commander. 4 mana, 2 blue, 2 generic, you get a 1/4 human artificer. And he has 3 different abilities. Let's skip the first one for a moment and let's read the second one. Tap an untapped artifact you control, add 1 blue mana to your mana pool. Let's read the third ability. 5 mana, shuffle your library, then exile the top card. Until end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. With only those 2 abilities, we already have a functional strategy inside this format that Ursa could perform to a great extent. He might actually be one of the better Paradox Engine commanders from this. Whenever you activate his 5 mana ability, the third ability, and you flip into something that isn't a land, you may cast that thing without paying mana for it. And then you get the Paradox Engine trigger to untap all your artifact. I wanna point out as well that you can actually use Ursa to tap Paradox Engine for 1 blue mana. And then of course, if you would gain infinite mana, for example with Dramatic Reversal and Isochron Scepter, you could exile your entire deck and then cast your entire deck. I also want to point out that you don't have to cast them in a specific order. You can cast them in whatever order, because how the text reads is that you may cast that card until end of turn without paying mana for it. In other words, Ursa is a great PST commander, or how the internet is actually calling him now, UPS, Ursa Paradox and Scepter Strategy Deck. But the S on the end could also stand for stax, Ursa Paradox Stax, because his secondary ability will effectively turn every artifact into a mana producing artifact, an artifact you can tap for mana, and that is really scary with these 3 artifacts, Winter Orb, Twin Sphere and Static Orb. Let's actually read Winter Orb. As long as Winter Orb is untapped, players can't untap more than 1 land during their untap step. That means that with Ursa we can actually break parity here, because in your last opponent's end step, you use Ursa's secondary ability and tap Winter Orb. That means that when you go to your untap step, you will notice that Winter Orb is tapped. That means that you will untap all your lands and you will untap Winter Orb. So when you pass turn in your end step, Winter Orb is active. You're basically turning it off and on during your opponent's turns and it on off during your turn. The same thing with Twin Sphere and Static Orb. Now that means that we don't actually have to play any mana rocks whatsoever. We can actually play only stax artifacts, artifacts with static passive ability that is locking down the game somehow, like Piffing Needle, Sorcerer's Spyglass, Lodestone Golem. Ursa's Yitte is not that terrible. Equip it to Ursa and you can start killing dorks and Tumnus and other things. Phyrexian Revoker is good, and Sabu's Web is a card draw stacks effect. It's affecting some lands out there. And this is a huge advantage for the Urza's UPS Paradox Engine build compared to Thrasius' PST build. Thrasius is the typical Paradox Engine commander, but he have to have dorks and rocks to draw cards with his ability, and then he cast that card and use Paradox Engine to untap those rocks and dorks to proceed this infinitely. While Ursa don't need any rocks whatsoever. He could fill his entire deck with only stax artifacts. And that means that the ratio of interaction inside Ursa's deck could go much higher, because in Paradox Engine PST Thrasius deck, you have to have a high ratio of dorks and rocks to make it function. Ursa don't need that. However, being mono-colored mono-blue is a huge weakness compared to being a 4-color deck. With Thrasius, you get access to 4 colors, you get access to a lot of good cards, and that means that they are kind of equal. They have some ups and downs. There are some huge advantages with the Ursa, but there are some huge advantages with Thrasius as well. So it kind of depends on how you like to play the game. But something really cool and freakishly scary is that we could actually play Null Rod in Ursa. That's weird, because Null Rod is supposed to be a counter towards artifact decks. Null Rod makes it impossible to activate artifacts' abilities. However, Ursa's ability to tap artifacts for mana is a creature ability. That means that Cursed Totem is gonna shut Ursa down, but we could actually play Null Rod. There are some huge reasons why you shouldn't play Null Rod, because some of the interactive artifacts we have actually have an activated ability. So it depends a little bit how you feel and how you construct your deck. But Null Rod is a great card. It's shutting down a lot of other artifact decks out there. But we could actually play a whole bunch of Mox Sapphires. And now you might be a little bit skeptic, because this Mox Sapphire is actually banned and illegal in this format. But once your commander is in play, every zero costing artifact is a Mox Sapphire. For example, Crow Mox. Cast Crow Mox, don't imprint anything, and when your commander is in play, it turns into a Mox Sapphire. Lotus Petal, you can sacrifice Lotus Petal to gain a mana, but you can have it as a Mox Sapphire when your commander is in play. Mishra's Bauble is a great card. You can sacrifice it to draw a card in the next turn's upkeep, but you could use this as a Mox Sapphire when your commander is in play. I would also like to showcase this Urza Hatchery, which is a strictly casual card. It's not that good for competitive play. XX Urza Hatchery enters the battlefield with X shard counters on it. That means for 2 mana it gets 1 shard counter, 5 mana and tap it. Put a 1 green snake creature token onto the battlefield for each shard counter on Urza Hatchery. So if you pay 10 mana into this, each time you tap it for 5 mana, you will create 5 green snakes. That's terrible. But the fact that we could just cast it for 0 mana and then tap it for mana with our commander means that it's not a dead card inside our deck. And if the game goes long, Stax deck are really good at making sure that the game goes long. Mono Blue Control is really good at making sure that the game goes long. And if our Paradox Engine or Dramatic Reversal or our other ideas of winning the game just goes out of the bin and in face down exile somehow, that actually happens sometimes, then suddenly we don't have a way of winning, and then suddenly we top deck and draw Urza Hatchery, and we dump all our mana into this and we start accumulating a beatdown. Now I'm not saying that you should actually play Urza Hatchery or cards with this similar effect or this similar style, because there are some other variants to Urza Hatchery that are casual but could function inside this deck anyhow, not being a dead card. It kind of depends on how you want to build your Ursa deck. I think it's time that we actually take a look at Ursa's first ability. We kind of skipped that one out, and I actually think that Ursa's first ability is a little bit interesting. When Ursa Lord High Artificer enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. This means that Ursa has the option of a beatdown strategy plan C if everything else fails, something very few other mono blue commanders actually has, and also something that many other multicolor commanders actually has. That means that a lot of casual players might go for the Conjurer's Closet to flicker Ursa at the beginning of their end step each turn and produce a colorless construct each turn. I think that's bad. 5 mana for a card that produces a grindy plan C value isn't really that good. There's a better alternative. Capsize. 6 mana, if you pay the buybacks cost, you can return target permanent to its owner's hand. This is an interaction, a really expensive interaction, and that's why we don't actually play it. But in a Stax deck, in a deck that can use all of its artifacts as mana, we kinda have the mana. And you can use this card to flicker your commander if you're going for plan C to cast him again and produce a token. And if nothing else is happening, that is something. But if an opponent is actually trying to win, we can use Capsize to prevent that from happening. But I haven't really mentioned how we're gonna win the game when we have infinite mana and draw our entire deck, or when we are going through our entire deck with the Paradox Engine combo UPS strategy. I'm gonna be using Capsize. Don't exile your entire deck, leave a few, because you're gonna get some tutors that you can tutor for Capsize. Then cast Capsize with your infinite mana and buyback and return every permanent your opponent controls, all their lands as well. Then sit there with your infinite mana and cast Capsize, targeting your commander, return into your hand, cast him again, and repeat this infinitely and create infinite tokens. And if you have an extra turn spell, you cast that extra turn and you attack with infinite tokens. Infinite tokens. Or you simply pass turn. Remember, every permanent is back to your opponent's hands, all their lands as well. So they can put a land into play and then basically pass turn. And if you're sitting there with all your stax artifacts in play, you kind of have the game. And you have infinite tokens, infinite tokens. And then when they've all passed their turn, it's your turn again, just simply attack. So Capsize is a very weak interaction, it is a win con, and it is a plan C grind effect that we could cast and use to flicker our commander and build a beatdown army if it comes to that. Let's look at some other honorable mention non-artifact cards like Training Ground. This actually works with your commander. It will reduce the activative cost for your commander by 2, so instead of 5 it will cost 3. That is actually quite good. Then we have Back to Basic. We're playing a mono blue deck, so Back to Basic is pretty much an auto include. We're also playing a stax deck, so this is like the auto include of auto includes. Counterspell. You should definitely have a lot of counterspell in this deck because of this. You cast your commander, you have a bunch of Winter Orb and maybe another artifact in play. That means that you can now suddenly tap these artifacts for blue mana to cast counterspell during an opponent's turn. Then of course Tesseret the Seeker, a great tutor. He can't really tutor for Paradox Engine unless you get to +1 him first. Then you can search for something like 5. But he can find Isochron Scepter and smash that thing into play. He can also untap and be a little bit of a rock. But he could also replace the Capsize. If you cast Tesseret, you +1 him once, and then you do the interactive stuff, and then you take your turn, and you ulti Tesseret, and you go to combat with all of your artifacts as 5/5s. That's quite possible as a replacement for Capsize. But if you want to take a look on how I've built my mono blue Ursa deck, there's a link in the description below of this video. As a final review, because this is something of a review video and a deck tech video, I consider Ursa to be the strongest mono blue commander we currently have. Very few other commanders out there have the potential that this guy provides. He has a Plan C beatdown potential. He will turn every artifact into a rock. He will synergize with Winter Orb in a great way. He can draw cards, and with that card draw potential, we can actually perform some combos. I'm truly happy that Ursa is a mono-colored commander, because if he had more color identities, he would be close to broken, even overpowered, and maybe should even see a ban. However, I truly think that they made a great card design of this one, a mono-colored commander that is really strong and looks really fun to play. I truly think that Ursa is a demi-god commander. And with that, I'm out of here. Take care guys, and I'll see you in the next video. If you have a question, leave a comment and I will try and answer that question.